fellow coffee consumers and crime connoisseurs. Welcome to the 26th episode of Mugshot Mornings, where we explore true crime one sip at a time. Today's story is one that you probably have heard of, as it revolves around someone who in 2015 confessed to a murder over a microphone that he did not know was recording. Robert Durst was a very wealthy real estate agent who seemed to have it all. Money, power, a life of privilege, but he carried a long trail of secrets, suspicions, and even murders. His wife, his close friend, his neighbor, all found dead, and only one person had direct ties to all three. Over decades, the puzzle pieces of what happened to these victims started to form, and the final piece was an unknowing confession in a bathroom. So grab your coffee as I brew up the story for you of Robert Durst. As always, before we get into the official story, we have to talk about some updates and what we're sipping on. Today, I made the TikTok coffee, the Dalgona coffee. I was hoping that it would not sink before I could stir it up for you guys, but I don't think that's gonna work. I also got this new travel coffee tumbler because I don't know what it is. Coffee only tastes good in the plastic cups or in a glass tumbler. The plastic ones that I'm talking about from when I first started talking, what is the ones that you get coffee shops, the to-go ones. But the plastic tumblers that people get, the Starbucks tumblers that are in different colors, or the ones you can get Walmart, Target, literally anywhere. I don't know what it is. They literally dilute the coffee and it just tastes like water every single time I try it. I've already had a hot latte today, so I was going to do something cold, but I didn't want to start up my machine again. So I was I'll just make a Dalgona because you can't go wrong with this. It literally is like a coffee milkshake without the runs. Oh my God. Y'all remember when this was insane in the membrane during TikTok times? My microphone is literally so far away from me. I'm so sorry. It's not as whipped as it normally is because I added the vanilla syrup to it. So it kind of made it a little bit more runny because I added it. Overall, still delicious. The shit freaking slaps every single time. Jesus Christ. Oh, I just wanted to say thank you guys for always tuning in and listening. If you're new, I forgot to do my thing. If you are new to listening, my name is Sydney. I am the host of the Mugshot Mornings podcast. I do all the editing, all the filming, all of the research, everything. So if you're new, hey, be sure to subscribe, and tell your friends. Today we have a long one, okay? I have how many pages of single space? 24 pages long, but that's because there's a long line from this man, okay? I only found out about this guy because of the confession that went around on TikTok that most people didn't know about. We got a long one today, you guys, and I hope that you guys enjoy because it's a little insane. Technically, he is a serial killer, but not a notorious one, but just because of the cool off period, this one's a little insane. So just be prepared as we get into the story, okay? So who are we talking about? Who confessed on the microphone? Well, his name is Robert Allen Durst, and he was born on April 12th, 1943 in New York City, New York. He was the eldest child of Seymour Durst and Bernice. He had two brothers and one sister, Douglas, Thomas, and Wendy. He was raised in Scarsdale, New York, which was a really wealthy-esque type of suburb over in New York, and he went to school in the Scarsdale School District. His father, Seymour, owned a prominent real estate company, and Robert was heir to take over this company when Seymour later retired. They were a very wealthy family, and it was a real estate company called the Durst Organization that owned many commercial and historic properties along with residential buildings in the state of New York. Now, at the time, the Durst family were one of the 5 main real estate wealthy dynasty-styled families. You had the Malkins, the Fisher brothers, and even the Trumps. Joseph Durst started the organization. He was Seymour's father and, of course, Robert's grandfather, but Seymour took over the organization in 1974. The Durst organization owns over 13 million square feet of real estate, and they even own a small percentage of the new building that was built after the World Trade Centers. They own 3,500 rental properties, and they even own the Bank of America Tower that is this huge building in New York, and a bunch of other like residential styled places. They own a lot of property. And in 1950, when Robert was only 7 years old, his mother tragically died after she fell from the roof of her home. Now, Robert even goes on to say that he even watched his mom. His father held on to him and was like, look at mama out. And Robert had explained, he was like, I always wondered, like, why is mama in her 90? Why is she on the roof? Like, what's going on? And he says that he witnessed her jump to her death, meaning that she unalived herself. But we know now that Robert is a very good manipulator and liar, so it's very possible that he lied about this. So you have reports saying that it's an accident. You have some reports saying that it's a suicide. No matter what, it had a huge impact on Robert. His mom's death really, really, really hurt him. Douglas was Robert's younger brother, and they never got along. Still, even up to the time of all of this that we will talk about later, they never got along. I don't think they had talked in years. When Robert was 10 years old, he was evaluated by a psychiatrist who said that Robert couldn't even be treated due to personality decomposition. They also said that he had schizophrenia, but at his age, he didn't. It's very, very rare and not likely that he had schizophrenia due to this. Children at this age don't have that, by the way. Schizophrenia doesn't really develop in both male and females until your mid-20s. Women more in their late 20s. You can start seeing signs, but not at a child this age. It's almost in your late teenage years is whenever you can start seeing early signs of it. After Robert graduated high school, he attended Lehigh University for undergrad, and then he went to Claremont University in California to receive his master's degree in economics. I also read that he attended UCLA but didn't graduate. I'm not entirely sure why, but he was enrolled at UCLA. He just didn't finish for whatever reason. He apparently took a leave of absence and just never returned. Now, while he was at UCLA, he met a woman named Susan Berman. She is not significant to the story right now, but please remember her name for later as she does come back up. Robert graduated with his master's and returned to his home state of New York, which is where he would meet his future wife. He met a woman who lived in his friend's building named Kathleen McCormick. Kathleen, otherwise known as Kathy, which is who I will refer to as in this video, she had just moved to New York City from Long Island. She was described as very charming, very likable, and kind. Kathleen was working as a dental hygienist, and the two hit it off quickly and started dating. Robert moved to Vermont, not really wanting to carry on the Durst empire, and he opened up a health food store that he named All Good Things. In January of 1972, after Robert had moved to Vermont, Kathy really wanted to go with him, and although there was like a 10-year age gap, at the time Robert was 29 and she was 19, she really wanted to move in with him because she came from a very religious, strict family, and Robert kind of was born with all of this money, a silver spoon in his mouth, and this was something that Kathy had never really experienced before. Only after a year of owning All Good Things and the two living in Vermont, Seymour was really wanting Robert to move back to get more involved in the Durst family and the Durst organization, and because he was trying to prepare Robert for taking on the family legacy because he was heir to take over the company, but Robert ran from it. I don't know, I couldn't remember why exactly, but Robert did not want to be the sole heir to the Durst empire. Robert and Kathy got married on Robert's 30th birthday, and Kathy explained that he changed pretty quickly after that due to the pressure of Seymour. Kathy noted that Robert, whenever they lived in Vermont together, was a very kind, loving man. And as soon as he was under the pressures and the strictness of his father Seymour, he changed, almost as if he changed into Seymour. She stated that Seymour brought out the worst in Robert, and he turned violent, started yelling at her and pretending to hit her throughout their marriage. He had developed this anger problem that she had never seen before. Kathy's brother Jim McCormick noted that he witnessed Robert abuse Kathy by grabbing her hair while they were at a family Christmas dinner. Kathy also had this diary that she kept of all of the details of Robert's abuse, describing how unhappy she was in the marriage, and even though they were some of the wealthiest people in the state of New York, Robert was frugal and cheap. Robert kept tabs on what Kathy was spending down to every single penny. He would ask her, "Why did you spend money on this? Did you even need this? Was this a necessity, even necessary? Why are you spending all of this money?" Kathy was also in medical school at the time to become a doctor, and there were reports that I read saying that she did this so that she could kind of get out from underneath Robert's hold of wealth that he had over her, where she wanted to make her own money and she didn't have to constantly spend his money and have that be something that he had over her head the whole time of like, I'm the sole provider, you married into me. I also read that Seymour had a conversation with Robert before they even got married of like letting him know, you know, she's not like us. She's not from this world. She'll never be. And Robert was okay with that. So the change that he had with Seymour, it almost seemed as if Robert was better off without his father, and maybe the events of today's case wouldn't have happened. But Seymour really did seem to bring out the worst in Robert. Kathy and Robert had many talks about not wanting kids. In a later interview, Robert said that he knew he was not going to be a good father and he never wanted kids. And that was something that him and Kathy talked about all the time. They tried to compromise a few times. Kathy even fell pregnant in 1976, but Robert was furious that she was pregnant. Kathy really wanted children. She really wanted to be a mom. So this really hurt her feelings whenever Robert reacted the way that he did, because they were married and he wasn't being kind about the conversation of children instead of compromising. Before she got pregnant, he had even talked to her about maybe they can adopt, which really excited Kathy, is that this may be his way of compromising. But every time she set up an appointment and told Robert about like, hey, we have an appointment tomorrow at this adoption agency, he refused to go. So it kind of made her lose hope. So whenever she did get pregnant, she was really excited, but Robert shut it down very quickly. They are fighting about having a procedure done to get rid of the child. I don't know if YouTube allows me to say the word that starts with an A, you know what I'm talking about. He really wanted her to not have this baby and even scheduled her an appointment to make sure that she did not have the baby. And they fought, and he said, well, ultimately, if you have this child, we're getting a divorce. I'm divorcing you. I'm not being a father. Robert admits in a later interview as well that he was strictly adamant about not having a child. And he said at the time it probably wasn't the best idea to have a child because they were fighting all of the time, even getting physically abusive with each other. She was not going to have this baby. I read that at the time that this was taking place, Robert was having an affair with another woman. So this could have complicated the affair, the relationships that he had with both women. And Kathy was in a very uncomfortable position as well because she was very unhappy in the marriage and she really wanted to have this baby, as that would have brought her some happiness and maybe bring her and Robert closer together. But I don't know, it just seemed like everything was very complicated at Kathy's life because she found out about the affair. She was in this really hard place of being unhappy in this abusive marriage. He's pressuring and threatening an abortion and a divorce. And now she's just stumbled across this Polaroid picture of her husband and a woman in their medicine cabinet. Their marriage was at a just very vulnerable place, and it didn't seem like either of them had any love for each other anymore. Kathy was also confiding in her friends that Robert was being very abusive and also having an affair, and she was extremely unhappy. Her friends even go on to state that her bubbly, happy self just turned very sad. She just had this very sad demeanor after she had married Robert. One of the women that Robert was cheating on Kathy with was named Prudence Farrow, which was apparently the same woman the Beatles sang about in their song, Dear Prudence. In 1982, now Kathy is 29 years old. She is in her last year of grad school at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, where she's studying to become a pediatrician. Because of her loveless marriage, Kathy was drinking and using drugs to cope with her sadness and the abuse. Specifically, I read that she was using cocaine. I didn't think that it meant anything, but it was a big sole focus of a trial later on. Kathy's friends also noticed that she looked really tired, like she really wasn't sleeping or even eating. She jumped at little things and just seemed nervous and detached all of the time. Kathy had confided in her friends as well that she was going to leave Robert as soon as she finished medical school, which was only one semester left. She was almost finished. It was mainly because he kind of funded her schooling, along with that way she could finish it. She didn't have to take out loans at the end of this time that she had been in medical school, but she had told her friends, after I finish, I'm leaving Robert for good. Somehow, Robert, before she could finish, got wind that she was going to leave him. So he had deactivated all of her credit cards. He stopped funding the last semester of school. He just cut her off financially completely. How he found out, I couldn't figure out. But you're probably wondering, why didn't she leave then? He knows now, like, she can just go. She can be done. My personal theory is that this is going to be probably one of the most stressful times in her life. She's about to be finishing her last semester of medical school. She would be going through a divorce if she left in her last semester. He financially supported her, and also we know that he's abusive. So him not having the control to initiate the divorce first probably not only angered him, but it would have made it really dangerous for her. If he was already physically abusive, we don't know the next steps he could have taken. Kathy, whenever her and Robert have this discussion of Robert knowing exactly what she's doing, she uses to her advantage. Right then and there, she demanded a divorce. She demanded that she has a $250,000 settlement, and she threatened blackmail. Apparently, she had some proof that Robert was committing tax fraud from the Durst organization and was making a lot of fraudulent charges throughout the organization as well that she was going to use against him. Robert did not take this news very well. He was very violent, screaming at her, being very uncontrollable, and just very violent. He threw money at her, and it just was not a good thing. This was at the time that she was at her apartment with two friends, Phil and George, who witnessed all of this as well. And only 10 days later, Kathy is missing. Kathy had told Robert, you're not going to act this way. I'm going forward with the divorce. I'm getting my settlement, and I'm moving to Delaware. And then 10 days later, she's missing. The last time Kathy was seen alive was January 31st, 1982, at a dinner party with friends. She went alone unexpectedly. Friends didn't know she was coming, but she was very serious about the divorce and leaving Robert. She really wanted to be done. And so she went to this party. Happened to be a fight involved whenever it came to her and Robert talking about her going to this party, but she was going no matter what. The friend's house that she was going to was named Gilberta, who lived in Connecticut. Kathy showed up to Gilberta's house in very casual clothes, which was not like her. She was really upset and was not acting like herself. Robert was begging her to come home so they could talk about things. He was very calm at first, and then eventually was calling her, screaming at her that he was going to come find her and it was not going to be good for her. Just overall very threatening tone. Gilberta said that the last conversation that she remembers having with Kathy was Kathy telling her, if anything happens to me, Robert did it. If I go missing, If you can't find me, if I'm dead, Robert did it. It was Robert. Robert mentioned in a later interview that this argument that they had before Kathy had went to this dinner was a pushing and shoving type of argument. Kathy really wanted to take the car, but Robert was refusing for her to take the car and said that he was not going to drive her anywhere. She was not driving by herself anywhere. And either way, she was going to go. But he took the keys so that she couldn't drive. So she ended up taking a train there. She still went to the party, but she just didn't drive. Kathy was supposed to leave and go to her home in Manhattan by train. Robert told police that he was at a neighbor's home having a drink and spoke with Kathy on a payphone before he went back home and went to sleep. Over the course of the next following days, Gilberta said that she had not heard from Kathy and she knew something was wrong, so she immediately called the police. At the same time, Kathy had not returned to her classes in medical school. Her school even reached out to Robert to ask where she was. Eventually, after 6 days of her being missing, Robert finally told the police his wife was missing. When questioned by police why Robert waited almost a week to report his wife missing, he said that him and Kathy would go days without speaking to each other. Kathy was either working at the hospital or studying, and they would go days just not speaking because she was so busy trying to finish medical school that this was very normal. So he didn't know until after a few more days that she was possibly missing. Robert also stated that he spoke to Seymour about what he should do since she was missing, and Seymour stated that since they consistently had fights and arguments that she probably just left. Seymour had also encouraged Robert to just let her be. He said, she's going to come back, so doesn't matter, just wait it out. But Robert said that he only waited a couple of days after this conversation until he just couldn't any longer, and that's whenever he told the police. He also told police that he knew that they were going to ask about how their marriage was, about problems in their marriage, and he also knew that this was not going to be something that she would just do. She wouldn't just run off and not finish medical school, so he knew it would look bad for him. Overall, Robert had a very calm presence in this interrogation and didn't seem worried about her. Robert told police that he dropped Kathy off at Metro North Station in Katona and spoke to her on the phone when she arrived at their apartment in Manhattan. This story was also backed up by the doorman to their building who said that he saw Kathy enter the building. The dean of the medical school also had mentioned that Kathy, or someone who called in saying that they were Kathy, said that they called in to school saying that she was going to have a sick day and she couldn't come to school that day. Now, I said earlier Robert didn't really seem super worried in the interrogation about her whereabouts and where she was. The only thing that he had offered was $100,000 leading to her whereabouts or possibly her body. We don't know. The worst part about this was Kathy's disappearance was posted in so many newspapers, and the story of her, this millionaire's wife being missing, was posted everywhere before Kathy's family was even notified that she was missing. Kathy's family knew from the very start that it was Robert. They knew it deep down. They had it in their gut. They knew that Robert was involved in some way in her disappearance. Now, introducing again Susan Berman. Robert and Susan were besties, okay? Susan enters the chat and becomes Robert's spokesperson, his confidant. She literally was ride or die for Robert. She wanted to help him out and even made statements for him to news outlets and the media so that he didn't have to regarding Kathy's whereabouts. 3 weeks after Robert had reported Kathy as missing, her stuff was found in their building's trash compactor. Kathy and Robert had 2 homes. One was their apartment in Manhattan, and the other home was in South Salem. Kathy's friends, Gilberta and Ellen Strauss, really wanted to get down to the bottom of where Kathy was, so they broke into their South Salem home to hopefully find answers, or maybe even find her. What they came across, though, was way more unexpected than what they were hoping to find. Kathy's stuff was found in the garbage. Her stuff was strewn out everywhere, and it just it looked like somebody was trying to get rid of her stuff. They said that their house was a wreck. Her mail was ripped up and thrown everywhere, and it looked like Robert knew she wasn't coming back because a lot of her personal belongings, including her clothes, was found in the garbage. They also found an itinerary written by Robert that started on the exact day she went missing, along with a few days after. The itinerary consisted of the words town dump, bridge, dig, boat, other, shovel ore, car, truck, and wrench. Many of us know this is a list of things to do on how to dump a body. They also noted that Seymour, Kathy's father-in-law, showed no remorse or emotion whenever it came to Kathy's disappearance, almost as if he didn't care. Like I said earlier, Robert was almost like a spitting image of Seymour, and Kathy had noticed this and noted of it multiple times. When Kathy's friends, the one that broke into her home, brought all of this evidence to detectives saying, her stuff is in the garbage, we found this itinerary, detectives said, yeah, that's a weird thing to do. No one that is innocent would be tracking down their every single step. It's almost like it was calculated because their wife was missing. It was like he was writing down his day-to-day activities so that way he could keep his story straight if he was interrogated on his events leading up to Kathy's whereabouts and afterwards. So what he was doing was very calculated and very meticulous. Robert was even caught in the Manhattan apartment throwing her stuff down the garbage chute that led to the building's incinerator. The building manager even had to go up to Robert's apartment to be like, hey, you need to stop because you're clogging up the chute. Not only is Robert throwing away all of Kathy's belongings, even putting it down, especially into the incinerator, who knows if that was the clothes that Kathy was even wearing of her disappearance that could have led to what happened. A lot of DNA evidence, things like that, into the incinerator to burn it. He also refused to do any polygraphs. He also refused to do any interrogations with police. He wouldn't do interviews. He didn't answer any questions. And that's why he had Susan. Susan was going to do all of that for him. It was just very odd. Robert was very odd. Although authorities and detectives and investigators, everybody was very suspicious of Robert, they had nothing tying him to Kathy's disappearance. So Kathy's case went cold. For now. After Kathy's disappearance, Robert kind of left the elite social scene and the Manhattan lifestyle and rekindled his relationship with Susan Berman. For 10 years, approximately from 1990 to 2000, Robert kind of changed his image, but not for the better. He was caught urinating in a trash can, and this was kind of the final straw for his father. He was just acting out, and I couldn't find why, but Seymour noted that this behavior was too erratic for someone who was supposed to be taking over such a huge and large company and be the face of this company. So in 1994, Seymour gave the company to Robert's younger brother, Douglas, the one that Robert hated. Robert had worked for the Durst organization up into 1994, but as soon as Douglas was going to be the one to take over the company, Robert left immediately. Robert sold the South Salem home and filed for divorce from Kathy, claiming spousal abandonment. The police in 1999 were going to reopen Kathy's case and look more into it and do a further investigation that they should have fucking done, but sorry, getting heated. And so they went to search the South Salem home, even though it didn't belong to Robert anymore. But Robert got wind that this was happening, and so he flew New York to Galveston, Texas. Sorry, it's not funny. It's just very random. That's a random place to go from New York. I mean, that's like, imagine being a millionaire from New York City and going to Galveston, Texas. Like, that's so random. But he really reinvented himself because he went from having 2 homes, money out the ass that you couldn't even believe of having, to this place in Galveston where their apartments were less than $500 a month. They were known to be very run down, it just was like it was a dump compared to what he normally had, is what I'm trying to say. The best thing about it, though, is that no one knew who he was. No one knew that Robert Durst was Robert Durst, specifically because he was posing as a woman named Dorothy Signer. Robert would wear wigs, pretended to be nonverbal, but he would sign that his name was Dorothy Signer. It's not funny. I'm sorry, I just almost started laughing. It's not funny, it's just like, what? Robert had a very distinctive voice, so that's probably why he went as nonverbal, because people would probably know him or know that he was secretly a man. So he could be very easily identifiable, so that's why he went mute almost. Like he didn't want anyone to know who he was. However, his drag didn't last long because only a month later, he married a woman named Deborah Sheraton. It is alleged that Robert married Deborah because you can't testify about your spouse in the state of New York, so this could have been very calculated. But they were on and off dating from 1999 to 2000, so it's possible that they just got married just because they had been dating, but unlikely. This man's very meticulous, as I've stated multiple times. But Deborah and Robert didn't even spend time with each other, let alone see each other or talk to each other at all. So this kind of supports the evidence that maybe they married just to help Robert's case out, where she couldn't testify against him. Robert later on even admits that he married Deborah out of convenience because he wanted someone to have power of attorney over his assets. So again, just calculated. Does not support the evidence that they actually cared about each other. But up until the time of all the trials and everything, Robert and Deborah were still married. So I'm just, you know what a lavender marriage is, where someone's straight and then someone who is gay or lesbian will marry each other just kind of for the financial stability or just a lot of the benefits of being married. Their marriage is just weird. I couldn't find much about them. In 2000, police were still investigating Kathy's disappearance and requested to speak to Susan Berman. Susan was living in Los Angeles working as a journalist, and she contacted Robert to let him know the police had asked to meet with her. She was trying to work as a screenwriter for 2 books that she had written. I couldn't really see if these books were successful. I saw that they were published and you can read them. She was trying to make the books that she had written into a movie, and she was working with someone to make it into a movie, but she wasn't doing very well financially. And she had a long list of people that she owed money to that helped her out, and this included Robert. Robert gave about $50,000 to her whenever she needed it because she was facing eviction from her home and was just really desperate for money. Susan's parents also, she just didn't have a good childhood growing up. Her father was a very known mobster and her mother was a retired ballerina. But her father being a mobster, if I remember from the Jinxed, I didn't write this down. I'm so sorry. So if I say this wrong, just quote me on it or I will write it down here. I think she found out about it by reading something in the newspaper, or it was a magazine clipping of the most famous mobsters of the time. When she was 12 years old, her father passed while in the middle of having a surgery. And then 1 year later, her mother died from a fatal drug overdose. So she didn't have any parents in her teenage years, which just did not add on to the best childhood. Now, Robert, who also lost a mom whenever he was very young to a suicide, when they met at UCLA, they kind of trauma bonded, and that's kind of what sparked their friendship. But they got very, very close. Robert was even the one to walk her down the aisle on Susan's wedding day. Susan was also Robert's alibi for the night that Kathy had went missing. The money that Robert was giving to Susan really helped her out, and she was able to settle a lot of her debts. Her life was starting to pick back up, and she was even hired to work on a couple of big projects at her job. But when Susan was contacted by the district attorney asking to be interviewed regarding the Robert Durst investigation of his wife, Kathy, being missing, it seemed to kind of send her in a spiral. Susan was known to be very paranoid after knowing that her father was in the mob. The mob can be very dangerous and also known to go after family members if something bad were to have happened. She also frequently visited psychics and stuff, and she was just a very paranoid, kind of erratic person, is how some people would explain her as whenever it came to a lot of projects and relationships that she had with people. She also allegedly told a friend named Kim that the DA had contacted her and she had a story of a lifetime that would really help out her career. Susan was also being posted all over the newspaper saying that she was going to come out and be interviewed by police, and it was about the disappearance of Kathy Durst, which would go against her best friend, Robert Durst. Now, at the time, Robert and Susan were not super close because of his disappearance to Texas. No one really knew where he went, and he didn't tell Susan that either. Susan also had told her friend Kim that the last psychic that she had visited said that she was going to die a violent death by a gun. Police had responded to calls made by neighbors stating that Susan's dogs were running loose on the street. And on Christmas Eve 2000, police entered Susan Berman's home to find her deceased by gunshot wound to the back of the head. Police noticed that there were no signs of forced entry, so Susan had likely allowed someone that she knew to enter her home. She also frequently wrote about being a mobster's daughter, so this could have been an act by the mob. We don't know. When police questioned people around Susan, they told investigators that Susan was very paranoid, had several locks on her door that she triple-checked, and she would have never opened a door to a stranger. So whoever had done this must have been someone that she knew. The DA also got wind of Susan's death right after the DA had asked her to do an interview, so she grew really suspicious. How is it that one person who was going to be interviewed about the disappearance of Kathy Durst is being posted everywhere that she's going to do this interview, and then she's found deceased shortly later by a gunshot wound in like execution style? Some people were kind of on the fence though. Would she have even been unloyal to Robert? Would she have been loyal to her friend and not say anything? Did she know something and was killed to keep quiet? Was it Robert? It could have been Robert, but she was very loyal to Robert. She probably wouldn't have done that to him. But she also talked about this is a great story for her career. Could this have been that Robert was involved in Kathy's disappearance? No one knows. So only 2 days before the police had discovered Susan's body, on December 23rd, they had received an anonymous letter that contained Susan Berman's address along with the word cadaver. I'm going to put this note on the screen, and I want you to really look at it and remember it because this is really, really significant later. Later on, the prosecuting attorneys theorized that Robert killed Susan after he found out that she was going to be interviewed by police, and he thought maybe she would finally turn him in. Now, the weird thing about it is that we know that Robert was in Texas around this time, but at the time of Susan's death, Robert was actually in California. The day that she was murdered, Robert had a red-eye flight from San Francisco to New York, and he didn't even attend her funeral. Robert was questioned and even a suspect, but they had no evidence to tie him to Susan's murder, so they had to let him go. Now, a quick switch up, back to Galveston. In September of 2001, in Galveston Bay, a man and his son were fishing when they came across something floating in the water. After getting a closer look, the man realized that it was a human torso. 12 trash bags full of various dismembered body parts were found scattered around the area, along with a box that a bow saw would come in, a receipt for garbage bags, a 4-inch paring knife, a .22 caliber shell casing, and a newspaper that showed a handwritten note that had 2213 Avenue K. Also, there was an eviction notice addressed to Morris Black, who happened to be one of the tenants at the address 2213 Avenue K. Morris Black was a veteran who lived a very isolated life away from his family, friends, and ex-wife. He was known to be a very hard guy to track down because he had pretty much just left his life since 1982. Morris had not worked for decades, as they found out that he had an offshore bank account that had around $130,000 in it, which could have been more since he had been living off of it his whole life from not working. But a lot of family and friends noted that they didn't know that Morris had this kind of money, and they don't know where it came from because they hadn't heard from him in years at this point. When police went to the address that Morris lived at, 2213 Avenue K, there was blood everywhere inside of his home. There was also blood drag marks that led from his apartment to the apartment across the hall that belonged to Dorothy Siner. Dorothy Siner was an old woman who was nonverbal. Neighbors stated that they knew she lived there, but they didn't have much to tell police because she was rarely seen leaving her apartment. When police obtained a search warrant to go into Dorothy Siner's home to see why there was blood dragged from Morris Black over to her apartment, there was blood everywhere inside of her home as well. Officers also found a paring knife, a handsaw, a pistol, and a cleaver. The medical examiner determined that all body parts belonged to 71-year-old veteran Morris Black. The question that was puzzling police was how was a 71-year-old man who was killed in his apartment but dragged and dismembered in a elderly woman who was nonverbal's apartment without any connection to each other. Dorothy at this point was missing, but she wasn't really considered to be a suspect because she didn't seem to have any ties to being home and also was rarely seen being home, so maybe she just had this apartment for every now and then. Police just didn't know. They had to look into who Dorothy Siner was. Police went digging in the building's trash and found a receipt that had Robert Durst's name on it. Police found out that there was a man loading trash bags into a silver Honda CR-V, walking in and out of Dorothy's apartment, claiming to be her brother-in-law. Police searched a national database to find Dorothy Siner, and they did find a Dorothy Siner who had a connection to Robert Durst. There was a Dorothy Siner, but she was verbal, and she actually knew a Robert Durst. She stated that Robert and her had went to high school together, but they had not spoken to each other in several decades. Police told her that there was an apartment being rented in Galveston, Texas by someone using her name and even her social security number. Obviously, as we know from earlier, Robert Durst had pretended to be an elderly, nonverbal woman named Dorothy Siner. After 7 days of police searching and investigating this Morris Black case, they found a Honda CR-V that matched the description, and there was a man driving it. Police pulled the driver over, which happened to be 58-year-old Robert Durst. When they searched the vehicle, there was a bow saw and blood in the trunk of the vehicle. Robert was arrested and charged with the murder of Morris Black on October 9th, 2001. While Robert was in custody, he made his phone call back to his wife, Deborah, telling her that he had been arrested and needed $250,000 for his bail, to which she responded with, "Okay, it'll be there in the morning." Robert paid his $250,000 bail, and whenever he was released, of course, he went on the run. He left Texas and went to Alabama and was literally so fucking stupid. I'm not kidding. He rented a car underneath the name of Morris Black. In Bath, Pennsylvania, Robert was found and arrested after he tried to steal a chicken sandwich and Band-Aids. Why was Robert trying to steal? I don't know. He had $30,000 cash in his car, along with a ID that belonged to Morris Black. Robert had also shaved off all of his hair, including his eyebrows, so that he could kind of disguise himself and be unrecognizable. Robert had also shaved off his eyebrows and his entire head to try and disguise himself. And when police researched his social security number to see who it belonged to, they realized he was not Morris Black, but he was millionaire Robert Durst, who was wanted for leaving Texas. In January 2002, Robert was returned to Texas for his trial for the murder of Morris Black. When his trial started, the jury really liked Robert. And I don't know why, but I'll put in some clips and stuff in the middle of this that even you'll wonder why. He just was very likable, and no one knew why. Robert testified that he came home on September 28, 2001 to find Morris really angry in his apartment. Morris had pointed a gun at him, and when Robert went after the gun, the two men fell to the ground trying to wrestle the gun out from each other's hands, and when the gun went off, it shot right through Morris's head. He stated that he attempted to get help from neighbors, but when no one answered the doors, he instead drank an entire bottle of Jack Daniels before dismembering his body and dumping it into the Galveston Bay. Robert said he didn't tell police that it was an accident because of his shady past. He didn't think people would believe him. In Robert's trial in Texas, they made Morris out to be a very violent man who was likely going to kill Robert first. And they also talked about the DEA named Janine Pirro, stating that she started this smear campaign against Robert just to run him out of New York. It was bullshit. Let me tell you. His trial and the death of Morris was around the time that Janine had opened up this investigation, and so they tried to make it seem like Robert was trying to get away from the smear campaign. He was trying to have a new life, and he just happened to come across Morris. He moved into this very low rent apartment and befriended Morris. Robert goes on to state that he and Morris were actually really good friends whenever he posed as Dorothy Siner, and then one day he took off his wig and revealed himself to be Robert, and Robert and Morris really hit it off. Morris said that he understood because he had tried to escape some things before, and he said, "I get it." I don't know. It was not brought up that there was a relationship, or a possible relationship between Durst and Robert regarding the construction business in the 1980s, but Robert had said that the two were actually good friends, his best friend even. Robert's defense was not trying to make it look like he didn't do it, but that it was self-defense. Robert even reenacted the fight they had battling the gun while in court. Robert stated that a few days before the self-defense murder incident, Morris had target practice on the eviction letter that he had received inside of the apartment. And this really angered Robert, and he had yelled at Morris to get out, and he can't shoot a gun inside of his apartment. I don't know, it was some bullshit that he made up. When the piece of evidence was revealed in court, meaning the eviction letter, there was not a bullet hole in the letter, so the prosecution argued that this was because this target practice on the eviction letter never happened, but there was a bullet hole found in the wall. So it was based on the gun going off whenever they were battling for the gun, or even maybe he missed. He was target practicing on the letter and he missed. Either way, there's a bullet hole in the wall, not in the eviction letter, so they can't prove that this actually happened. It is just what was said. So, Robert in court and in his interviews admitted that he had dismembered Morris's body. It's not funny. It's not funny. I'm sorry. Just wait. He admitted that he dismembered the body, put them in trash bags, and dumped them in the water. The only body part that was not recovered was Morris's head. But fingerprints and everything was able to determine that it was Morris. And it's not even DNA fingerprints. Robert had admitted to this. I'm sorry, it's not funny. Just wait. The prosecuting attorney is cross-examining him and even stating things like, "You saw the bags didn't sink, but floated, and you knew you had a problem, right?" And Robert is going, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir," to all of the questions. He asserts that he didn't kill Morris, but he did dismember his body. On November 11th of 2003, Robert Durst was found not guilty. He was acquitted of murder.
Will the defendant please rise? For the verdict of the jury is such. Will the jury find the defendant, Robert Durst, not guilty? Is there anything the attorneys would like to say at this point?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We also thank the jury for your sacrifice and your time.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gren.
Thank you for all your time and attention, your sacrifice over this long trial.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, jury, this is what the procedure is that we're going to follow. First of all, we're going to take you back into the jury room, and the clerk is going to give you whatever work excuses you need. At that point in time, I'm going to discuss with you your options as to whether or not you wish to discuss your views with the attorneys and or the press. So would the jury please be taken back now?
Robert had hired some of the best defense lawyers that money could buy, and he was acquitted of murder. His trial lasted 2 months, and like I said, the jury loved him. One of the jurors even befriended Robert after, and they were friends for years afterward. The jury said that there was not enough evidence to support that Robert had willingly killed him, mainly because the smoking gun was that his head was never found, so there wasn't an exact cause of death. So they really only had Robert's word. And a couple of the jurors said that they really felt that Robert was telling the truth and speaking from the heart. Because why would he admit to dismembering a body but not admit to murder? Like, what are you talking about? He thought he was going to get away with it because he didn't tell police. He threw the body in the water. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? He was disguised as a woman. Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not funny, but it's like, I'm laughing because it's almost like, what? Now, I am going to insert a clip here because although this is very sad for Morris, they did run with this story even on SNL. Charged with tampering with evidence and dismembering a body. So he did plead guilty to these charges. They set his bail at first to $3 billion, but the courts ruled this as unconstitutional, and so they lowered it to $450,000. In December of 2005, while he was on parole, he was arrested for violating his parole after he made an unauthorized trip to Galveston and was caught by the judge in a mall who even covered his murder trial. In February of 2006, Robert was released from prison, and in the same month, he was given a $65 million settlement from his family. I couldn't figure out the specifics, but he basically tried to sue his family for his half of, I guess, just being a Durst. But he settled for $65 million just so that he could cut ties with the Durst family and the Durst organization. And it seemed to be looking up for him because he only served 9 months for parole, and then he was off on parole, and he was just this free man. So life is good for him for right now. 4 years later, in December of 2010, a movie called All Good Things was released. This was a movie that was based on Robert's long line of crime. The movie is about a man who kills his wife, best friend, neighbor, and dog. Robert really enjoyed this movie and even reached out to the director, Andrew Jarecki, to tell him how much he loved this movie. The only negative comment that he had was that he didn't like that the character murdered the dog. So he didn't have any negative comments about all of the other things. Just that the dog was murdered, it didn't make sense. But him and Andrew became kind of besties. Andrew Jarecki decided to create an HBO documentary called The Jinxed, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst. Robert agreed to do this and had many interviews from 2010 until 2013. In all of these interviews, I really, before we actually get into The Jinxed, go watch it. It's so good. The Jinxed is so good. Andrew Jarecki, if you're watching this, that was a job well done, my brother. Okay. So in The Jinxed Part 1 that was released, there's many interviews between Andrew and Robert. Robert goes on to say that he is not involved in any of the disappearances, or in the disappearance of his wife, Kathy, and the murder of Susan. He goes on to say that it is, possible that Kathy is still alive, but not likely. He actually apologizes to Kathy and says that he misses her and he wishes he could tell her that. I don't know, some bullshit. He also admits that he lied to police about his involvement with Kathy's disappearance, even going on to state that he told police what they wanted to hear, which was that he had dropped Kathy off at the train station and then she was just never seen again. In the Jinxed, the first episode is the only episode that Robert does not show in when it comes to his interviews. The very first episode actually starts off with the trial in Galveston for the murder of Morris Black. In the Jinx, Robert is pretty much interviewed in all of the episodes except the first one. In episode 4, that takes place on the trial that happened in Galveston and like the verdict and everything, Robert is heard consistently repeating to himself, "I did not knowingly and purposefully lie." And his freaking lawyer has to come up and be like, "You have got to stop talking. Your mic is still on." Like, we are hearing everything that you're saying. You need to stop talking.
Just hear every word you said.
What? Oh, I was reviewing it. I hear what you're saying.
After Robert's initial interview, he was only interviewed twice, if I remember correctly. His interviews just kind of spread out throughout the Jinx. Robert, in his interviews, after he finishes his first interview, Andrew reaches back out to him for a second interview after they get some knowledge about something that they really want to try and get him on. It's almost as if Robert kind of understood why he was being asked to come back, because he tells Andrew, "I can't. I'm actually going to Madrid. We can when I get back." Well, Sarib, which is Susan's stepson, had told Robert that Andrew and his team reached out to him, and Robert was like, "Well, don't tell them I'm here in LA. I told them I'm in Barcelona, so just don't mention it." After this, Robert cancels and reschedules several times and even goes on to say that he's not doing it. Andrew even said, like, "I don't think he's going to come back and do it." It's almost as if he knew that something bad was going to happen, but eventually he comes back and says, "Yeah, I'll do the interview." The thing that they were going to try and get Robert on is going to blow your fucking mind, bro. When I saw it, I lost it. A letter written by Robert to Susan showed that he misspelled Beverly, and it was written in the exact same font and had the same misspelling of Beverly. Jarecki questioned Robert about this in his second interview, noting that it was the exact same as the one found in Susan's apartment. He even shows the two side by side and asks Robert if he can pick the one that he wrote, and Robert says that he can't. Earlier in his first interview, he had told them that he didn't write the note, but whoever did had killed her, and that is why they had used block lettering so that no one could figure out the handwriting. Andrew Jarecki and his team obtained a lot of handwritten letters, so that way they didn't go based off of only the two letters. They wanted to really decipher if this was Robert because it was very unique handwriting, especially with Beverly being misspelled. The two letters that I'm talking about, Susan's stepson shows a letter that was written from Robert to Susan, and it had Beverly and block letters misspelled. The letter that had cadaver written on it, the cadaver letter that people call it, that was sent to police, had Beverly on it in block letters and was misspelled, and they are almost identical. They wanted to see if there were distinctive characteristics in his handwriting, but it ultimately determined that Robert was the only person that could have written these letters, as they were just too unique to be someone else. What is also interesting that really helps the case is that people don't use the word cadaver often. You hear it with cadaver dogs, and what that is to find missing people, specifically a body, or even body parts, dismemberment, bones, things like that. You hear cadaver dogs, but you don't hear someone explaining the word cadaver. cadaver is used to describe a dead body, and it's used mostly in the medical fields or in law enforcement. And Robert had heard this word regularly because Kathy had her own cadaver in medical school, and that's how she would use the term cadaver. She used the word cadaver to describe her dead body that she was using for medical school over and over and over. Robert was not in medical school and had no reason to use the word cadaver. So it kind of pieced a little bit together as well of why someone would describe cadaver, meaning a dead body, Susan's dead body, to be cadaver. Like, are you with me? After Andrew shows Robert this letter, Robert is very clearly nervous. He's very uncomfortable. He even burps, which is a sign of nervousness, and, which he says later on. Just wait. After this wraps up, where Andrew is kind of like, hey, which one did you write? And Robert can't say it. Andrew goes, that's it. We're done. Let's wrap up. Robert goes, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Now, if you haven't seen the scene, many of you have. I'm about to snip it here. Here we go.
There it is. You're caught. You're right, of course. But you can't imagine. First, I don't know what's in the house. Oh, I want this. Sister. He was right. I was wrong. I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Kill them all. Of course.
So, what you just heard is Robert obviously confessing to the murders of Kathy, Susan, and Morris. In season 2 of The Jinxed that was released last year, in episode 1, the very first episode, it shows the detectives, Kathy's family, and a bunch of people watching the series of The Jinxed and their reaction to the ending of season 1. When I tell you, I literally just thought about it and I get the chills. When I first watched that, it made me so emotional seeing the people get their closure. It was almost like they felt all emotions they possibly could at once. They were all gasping. A few of the family members were crying. The detective, including the DA, it was just the closure that they needed, although it was very sad hearing that someone admitted to murdering your family member. But hearing that he finally did it, oh my God, it is so good. You have to watch The Jinxed. Now, the day before the final documentary episode aired for season 1, on March 14th, 2015, Robert Durst was arrested for the first-degree murder of Susan Berman. They had filmed this scene in 2012, but Andrew had not gave the police the footage until 2013. The LAPD didn't open the case until 2014 when they received the audio of Durst's bathroom monologue, which sparked the investigation into him. Robert had been living in Houston, Texas, and had been watching the Jinxed documentary until episode 5. Episode 5 is where Andrew and his team are really doing some digging and investigating, and they note of the 2 misspelled Beverleys, which is what kind of leads to episode 6. Robert, after episode 5, flees to New Orleans, Louisiana. He was arrested in New Orleans with a .38 caliber revolver, marijuana, $40,000 cash, a map of Cuba, a full-face latex mask, fake IDs, and his own passport, which obviously meant that he was going to flee the country. Robert was arraigned the following morning and held on bail, but he was not allowed to be extradited back to LA because of facing charges for a felony weapon possession. The gun that was found in his hotel room in NOLA was why he was being charged, because he was a felon. He did end up pleading guilty to this charge, and he had to serve 7 years in prison. A year and a half after his arrest in November of 2016, Robert was transferred to LA to await trial for the first-degree murder of Susan Berman. He told the leading prosecutor that he was high on meth the entire time he was being interviewed for the Jinxed. The following year, in 2017, Kathy's family requested that she be pronounced as legally deceased. Now, in March of 2020, the long-awaited trial of Susan Berman's death began. But then it was halted again for another 14 months due to the pandemic, and it restarted in May of 2021. It started with his brother on the stand, and he did not talk positively about Robert. He explained that Robert treated him poorly when they grew up, how Robert would embarrass him, and his defense even tried to argue that his audio confession was heavily edited by Andrew Jarecki and his team. Robert's trial lasted several months, and it concluded in September of 2021. The jury took only 3 days to deliberate, but ultimately found Robert Durst guilty for the first-degree murder of Susan Berman, as well as killing a witness less than 1 month later. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Only a few weeks after his trial concluded, Westchester County in New York announced that the grand jury would hear witness testimonies along with evidence that relates to Kathleen's disappearance. That October, which was approximately a month after his trial had concluded, Robert was hospitalized due to COVID complications. The state investigator said that Robert would not live long enough to be indicted for the murder of Kathy. So on November 1st, 2021, over 40 years after her disappearance, Robert was indicted by the grand jury on the second-degree murder of Kathleen McCormick, which thankfully he was charged and indicted for this murder because only 2 months later, at the age of 78, Robert Durst died in a state prison hospital due to numerous health issues. I'm glad that he was indicted, but during Susan Berman's murder trial, he was in really bad shape. He did not look good. It looked like he was on his deathbed right then and there. He was battling bladder cancer, which obviously is sad, but he's a murderer, so it doesn't matter. So what pisses me off is that his life sentence for the murder of his friend Susan, he only served literally the rest of his life of 4 months. But he got away for the murder of his wife for 40 years. So this man is the luckiest unlucky man. He got to live his entire life before he actually had to go to jail. And then the time that he gets to go to jail, he dies. It pisses me off. Was money involved to keep people quiet? I don't know. A lot of speculation says that he paid off a lot of people to not look into Kathleen's disappearance. That's just a conspiracy theory. I don't think that's true. A lot of people were trying to get him and really, really believed that he was involved in Kathy's disappearance. And obviously he was charged with it, thankfully before he died. But Jesus Christ. Kathy's family said in a statement that they accused prosecutors and the NYPD for not only protecting the Durst family, but they didn't provide a thorough and competent investigation into Kathleen's disappearance 40 years prior. Although he was charged with her murder, Kathy's body has never been found. Kathy's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Deborah, Robert's widow, accusing her of helping him cover up the murder. As far as I'm aware, it was filed in 2022, but at the time of me filming this, there's nothing that has been done about it. It hasn't been completed. It is possible that Robert had claimed the lives of more than Susan, Kathy, and Morris, including his first possible victim, 18-year-old Lynn Schultz, in 1971. Lynn disappeared in December 1971 in Vermont as she was last seen at a bus stop eating dried fruit that she had purchased from All Good Things, Robert's health food store, which is very consistent with the time that he had opened it and where he had been living. They have not made the connection that it was Robert. What do we think? What do we think of the crazy life of Robert Durst. This man got away with so much. He got away with Morris's murder and then even admitted to it. Or he admitted to it later on. He admitted to dismembering the body, but admitted obviously in the Mike confession that he had killed him. But due to double jeopardy, he could not be convicted of a crime that he was already acquitted for. So even if he lived longer, he could have not gone back on trial for Morris's death. He could have went on trial for Kathy's, but that's just how I feel about it, because I can't believe it. I can't believe somebody. It reminds me of like Casey Anthony, who's on TikTok now. Isn't that some shit? Yeah, so we have this man in some ways, because I have researched this man for 2 months now, like fully watching everything. All Good Things, terrible movie. That was very lackluster. Everybody gave like boring ass performances. Ryan Gosling and Kristen Dunst, who are actually like really good actors, boring. Okay, that I could go on and on and on, but this man pisses me off, okay? This man got away with so much. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, as always. If you liked today's video on this channel, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends. If you're on audio only, listening to the podcast, be sure to download, rate the podcast, share it, whatever you want to do. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.